Welcome, friend. If you're listening to this story late at night or in one of those quiet moments when your heart feels a little heavier than usual, then you've come to the right place. This isn't a space for noise or rushing. It's a place for slowing down, for old memories, and for folks who've lived long enough to understand the comfort of silence. Some stories come to us when we need them most. This is one of those stories. A tale from the old frontier, when the West was still wild and lonely, and a person's word meant everything. It is about two souls who had every reason to give up, and a little boy who had forgotten how to speak. If you have ever stood at a crossroads, wondering which way to turn, or loved someone who could not find their way back to you, then this story is for you. I am not here to preach or teach. I am just here to share something true. The kind of truth that settles in your bones and stays there. So sit back, friend, pour yourself some coffee, and let me take you to a place called Redstone Junction, where our story begins.
The 4:15 to Denver pulled away from the platform. Trailing smoke that smelled of coal and iron, and somewhere far away, Elena Vasquez watched it go. She did not wave. There was no one on that train who knew her name. $12.40. She had counted it 3 times in the telegraph office, twice more in the washroom where nobody could see her hands tremble. Not enough for a ticket back to St. Louis. Not enough for a room past Wednesday. Not enough for anything except standing here on these sun-bleached planks, watching her last connection to the civilized world disappear into the afternoon haze. The telegram was still in her pocket. She had read it so many times the creases were wearing thin, but her fingers found it anyway. Pressing against the paper like a wound she could not stop touching. Regret to inform. Stop. William Thornton deceased. Stop. Fever. Stop. 3 weeks passed. Stop. Sincerest condolences. Stop. Deceased. 3 weeks passed. She had been riding trains for 2 of those weeks, writing letters to a dead man, picturing the face that would greet her at this very station. The face that would never come. A fly buzzed past her ear. The platform smelled of creosote and horse manure, and the particular dusty sweetness of prairie grass baking in the June sun. "Ma'am?" The station master stood at the edge of the platform. A wiry fellow with tobacco stains in his gray beard and suspenders that had seen better days. He shifted his weight from one worn boot to the other. "Platform closes at sundown. I ain't running a hotel here." "I understand." She did not move. Where would she go? The town of Redstone Junction was nothing more than a general store with a crooked porch, a saloon she could not enter, and a church with a steeple that leaned slightly east. She knew no one. She had no letters of introduction. No family within 1,000 miles, no skills except needlework and a passable singing voice, neither of which would keep her fed past the week. The station master spat tobacco juice into the dust. He looked at her carpet bag with its broken brass clasp, then at her face, then at the empty platform stretching behind her. Something like pity crossed his weathered features before he turned and shuffled back toward the telegraph office. Elena straightened her spine. She had learned young that pity was a currency that bought nothing but shame. She was 29 years old, orphaned at 12, raised in a church home that closed its doors the year she turned 18. She had survived worse than this. She had survived worse than a dead stranger and an empty platform, and $12 between herself and the void. The question was, how? A wagon creaked into the yard behind her. She heard the horses snort and blow, the jingle of harness brass, the heavy footsteps of a man who walked like he owned the ground beneath his boots. The sounds stopped somewhere at her back. 5 rolls of the wire, Hank, and them nails I ordered last month. Got it right here. Mr. Thornton. Sorry about the weight loss. Freight was backed up clear to... It's fine. Elena turned. She could not help it. Thornton. The name that had pulled her across half the country. The name on the telegram. The name of the dead man she had traveled 1,000 miles to marry. The man loading wire into a buckboard was tall and broad through the shoulders. Somewhere past 35. Sun and wind had weathered his face into lines that made him look older than his years. He wore no hat, and his dark hair showed early gray at the temples. His hands moved with the rough efficiency of someone who had loaded 1,000 wagons and expected to load 1,000 more. He paused, looked up. His eyes met hers, brown with flecks of something lighter underneath, like creek water in autumn when the leaves are turning. You the Thornton bride. The words hung in the air between them. Elena felt her chest go tight, her breath catching somewhere behind her ribs. He set down the coil of wire. For a long moment he just looked at her, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with the careful measure of a man who made decisions the way he loaded wagons. Slow, deliberate, nothing wasted. William was my brother, younger by 3 years. He picked up the wire again, settled it into the wagon bed with a thump. Fever took him fast. Doc said he didn't suffer long. I'm sorry for your loss. And yours. The station master had disappeared inside. The platform was empty now, except for the 2 of them and the patient horses and the dust that hung in the still air like something waiting to settle. You got kin somewhere? The man asked. I got nobody nowhere. The words came out plainer than she had intended, bare and final, like stones dropped into a well. She heard them hit bottom and knew there was no taking them back. He finished loading the wire. Then the nails, a wooden crate that clinked and rattled as he lifted it. Then he stood there with his big hands hanging at his sides, looking at her the way a man looks at a problem he had not expected but cannot walk away from. My name is Samuel Thornton. I got a ranch 12 miles east of here. Good land, good water, house that needs tending. He paused, and she watched his jaw work like he was chewing on words that did not want to come out. I got a boy, 7 years old. He don't talk much these days. Elena waited. The afternoon shadows were lengthening across the platform. A meadowlark called from somewhere beyond the tracks, its song high and lonesome in the silence. It ain't charity, Samuel said. I need help. You need a roof. That's all this is. You are offering me a position. I'm offering you a choice. His voice was flat, practical, empty of anything that might be mistaken for sentiment. Room and board, safety. In exchange, you care for the boy and keep the house. We marry legal. For propriety town talks enough already. But separate rooms, separate lives, no pretense between us. The sun was sinking toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. Soon the platform would close. Soon the choices would narrow to one walk into town with $12 and pray for a miracle. Or climb into a wagon with a stranger who looked at her like she was a fence that needed mending. Why? She asked. Why what? Why help me? You don't know me from Adam. He looked away, toward the hills going golden in the late light. Something moved behind his eyes, old and tired and buried deep. "Because my brother brought you here. And my brother is dead, because my boy needs someone. And I ain't enough." He stopped, shook his head. "Because I can't just drive off and leave you standing here. That's all." Elena looked at him. She saw the weariness in the set of his shoulders, the loneliness he carried like a second skin. She saw a man who had been hauling something heavy for a long time and had forgotten there was any other way to stand. She bent and picked up her carpetbag. The broken clasp caught the fading light. "All right, Mr. Thornton?" He nodded once, no smile, no relief, just the acceptance of a bargain made. He reached for the carpetbag, but she did not hand it over. Instead, she stuck out her right hand, palm sideways, the way men shake on a deal. He looked at her hand for a moment, then at her face. Something flickered in those autumn water eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something like respect. He took her hand. Her grip was stronger than he expected. His palm was rough as sandpaper and warm from the work. They shook once. Done. The station master had come back out to watch. He stood in the doorway of the telegraph office, arms folded, shaking his head slow. "Well," he said to no one in particular, "reckon that's one way to do it." The wagon pulled away from the station, wheels creaking, horses stepping steady. Elena sat straight-backed on the wooden seat, her carpetbag wedged between her feet and the boards. Her calico dress was stiff with 2 weeks of train dust. Her future was as uncertain as the road unspooling before them through the tall grass. She did not look back at the station. There was nothing behind her now but smoke and memory and a telegram that had cost 2 cents to send and everything to receive. Ahead, the sun was setting. The prairie rolled out like an ocean turned to gold, endless and still. Somewhere in that vastness, a little boy sat alone in a quiet house, stacking wooden blocks into towers that always fell. She did not know his name yet. She did not know the color of his eyes or the shape of his silence. She knew only that he was waiting, though he did not know it himself, waiting for someone who would stay. Whether she could be that someone, Elena could not say. But she had crossed half a country for a ghost. Surely she could manage 12 more miles for a chance. The wagon creaked on through the golden light. The horses pulled steady. And the sky turned slowly from copper to violet to the deep, endless blue of a prairie night coming on. If this story has found you today, we would be grateful to know where you are listening from. As the old folks used to say, a story shared is a blessing doubled. The wagon crested the last hill as purple darkness settled over the land. Elena saw the ranch spread below white fencing running straight as stitches, cattle dotting the far pasture like dark stones, a 2-story house with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. A single lamp burned in one window. A yellow eye watching their approach. Samuel had not spoken for the last 4 miles. The only sounds were hooves on packed earth, the creak of wagon wheels, and somewhere far off, a coyote starting its evening song. The horses knew the way home. They turned down the drive without guidance, their pace quickening. Elena gripped the seat as the wagon jolted over a rut. "Boy's name is Thomas," Samuel said. His voice came sudden and rough, like he had forgotten how words worked. "He won't look at you straight. Don't take it personal." Elena nodded, Her throat was too dry for answer. The porch steps groaned under Samuel's boots. He pushed the door open without knocking, and the smell hit Elena before she crossed the threshold. Dust. Cold bacon grease. Something sweet gone sour underneath. Like fruit left too long in a bowl. A woman stood in the dim hallway wiping her hands on a faded apron. Mexican. Maybe 60 years. With silver hair pulled back tight, and eyes that missed nothing. "This is Mrs. Garza," Samuel said. "She cooks? Cleans some?" Mrs. Garza looked Elena over, the way you look at a horse somebody is trying to sell. Measuring. Skeptical, taking her time. "You cook?" she asked. "I learn fast." Something shifted in the old woman's face. Not approval. Not suspicion, either. Something in between that Elena could not name. "Bueno, I'm too old to teach slow." A sound came from deeper in the house. Wooden clatter, then silence, then the clatter again. Elena looked past Mrs. Garza down the dim hallway. Lamplight spilled from a doorway at the far end, making a yellow rectangle on the worn floorboards. "That's him," Samuel said. He did not move toward the sound. "He builds towers, knocks them down, builds them again." Elena's boots were loud on the planks as she walked toward the light. Each step announced her. Each step brought her closer to whatever waited in that room. She stopped in the doorway. A small boy sat in the corner with his back to her. Wooden blocks lay scattered around him like fallen soldiers. His hands moved stacking, but his thin shoulders were too still, too careful. The stillness of a creature that had learned the world could take things without warning. He did not turn around. Elena watched his narrow back rise and fall with each breath. Watched his small fingers place one block on top of another, precise as a watchmaker, quiet as snow falling. The tower grew, 5 blocks, 6, 7. Then it fell. The blocks tumbled across the floor with a sound like dry bones rattling. Thomas did not rebuild. He sat frozen, hands empty in his lap, staring at the scattered pieces. Elena knew that stare. She had worn it herself for 3 weeks straight on train platforms, in boarding house rooms, reading a telegram until the words turned to nonsense. It was the stare of someone waiting for something that would never come back. She opened her mouth to speak. Though she did not know what she meant to say, Samuel's hand closed around her arm. "Not tonight," he said quietly. "Give him time." He led her back down the hall, up a narrow staircase, to a small room at the end. A bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a chipped basin, a window that looked out over darkness. "This was the sewing room," Samuel said from the doorway. "Catherine's... my wife." The name hung between them like smoke. "I cleared it out, mostly." Elena looked around. The walls were bare, but she could see the nail holes where pictures had hung. A faded rectangle near the window showed where a rug had lain. Someone had emptied this room, but they had not erased it. She set her carpet bag on the bed. The broken clasp caught the lamplight. "Mr. Thornton?" He paused at the door. "Your son. How long since he has truly spoken?" Samuel's jaw went tight. She watched the muscle work beneath weathered skin. Watched him swallow something that wanted to stay buried. 8 months, he said. Day after we buried her. He told me good night. Then, he stopped. Nothing since. He left without saying good night himself. His footsteps faded down the stairs. A door closed somewhere below. Elena sat on the edge of the thin mattress. Through the floorboards, she heard it again, the soft clatter of blocks being stacked. Stack, stack, stack. Then the fall. Then nothing. She pressed her palm flat against her chest and felt her heart beating steady beneath her hand. 8 months of silence. 8 months of towers that always fell. What had happened to that boy's mother? What kind of death could steal a child's voice so completely? And what, exactly, had she walked into following a dead man's name across 1,000 miles of empty prairie? Elena woke before first light. The room was cold, the window gray with early dawn. She lay still and listened. Silence, no blocks falling, no footsteps on the stairs, only wind pressing against glass and the far-off lowing of cattle waking in the pasture. She dressed quick in her second dress, plain cotton, patched at the elbow where she had caught it on a nail back in Kansas City, her only other outfit. She would need work for her needle soon, or be wearing rags by harvest. The stairs creaked as she went down. She paused on each step, learning which boards complained and which kept quiet, useful knowledge in a strange house. The kitchen was dark and cold. The cook stove sat black and silent, a cast iron beast waiting to be fed. Elena found matches on the shelf above, kindling in the box by the woodpile. She worked by feel and memory, building fire the way the sisters at the orphanage had shown her near 20 years ago. The kindling caught. Small flames licked up through the gaps. She fed it larger sticks, then split logs, adjusting the damper until heat began spreading through the iron. Coffee next. The tin sat on the second shelf. The pot hung from a hook by the stove. Water from the hand pump at the sink. Grounds measured by instinct. The smell rose as it heated dark and rich and alive. Somewhere outside. A rooster crowed, then another, answering from the barn. "You're up early," Elena turned. Mrs. Garza stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest, watching with those miss-nothing eyes. Could not sleep. The old woman crossed to the stove, lifted the coffee pot lid, peered inside. Her face showed nothing. Too strong, but you'll learn. She pulled an apron from a hook by the pantry door and held it out. Elena took it. The fabric was soft from years of washing. The strings frayed at the ends. Someone had embroidered small flowers along the pocket edge, delicate work in pink and yellow thread, faded now to shadows of what they had been. "That was hers," Mrs. Garza said. "Senora Thornton. She made it first year of her marriage." Elena ran her thumb across the stitching. Each flower was perfect, each petal placed with care. "I can use another if—" "No," Mrs. Garza's voice was firm. She would want it worn. She was practical. That one hated waste. Elena tied the apron around her waist. It fit like it had been made for her. The back door opened with a bang. Samuel came in stamping dust from his boots, though the sun had barely cleared the horizon. His shirt was already dark at the collar with sweat. He stopped when he saw Elena at the stove. The apron tied. The coffee sending steam toward the ceiling. Something crossed his face quick. Impossible to read, then it was gone. "You're up," he said. "I am." He hung his hat on the peg by the door. His boots left prints on the swept floor as he crossed to the table and pulled out a chair. "We should talk," he said. "The terms." Mrs. Garza was already moving toward the hall. "I'll see to the boy." She disappeared. The kitchen felt smaller, with just the two of them in it. Elena poured coffee into 2 cups, set one in front of Samuel, kept one for herself. She did not sit, not yet. "The terms," she said. "You heard what I said at the station?" "I heard. I need to know you understand." He wrapped both hands around the cup, though the coffee was too hot to drink. "This is not I am not looking for. I understand, Mr. Thornton. Do you—" His eyes found hers, direct, unwavering, the eyes of a man who had made hard choices before and would make them again. "You need someone for your son," Elena said. "Someone for this house. You do not need a wife, not truly." "No, and you are offering me safety, a roof, a place to be." "Yes. In exchange for what exactly?" He set down the cup. His hands were rough, the nails dark with work that never quite washed away. Honest hands. Capable hands. "You tend to Thomas. You run the house. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing." He paused. "You do not ask questions about Catherine. You do not try to fix what cannot be fixed. And we marry legal, so the town has nothing to wag tongues about. A marriage in name only? Yes. Separate rooms? Yes. And what do I call you, Mr. Thornton Samuel husband?" His jaw tightened. "Whatever suits you. Makes no difference to me." Elena pulled out the chair across from him and sat. The wood was hard, the table scarred with knife marks and water rings. How many meals had been eaten here? How many words spoken? How many silences endured? "I have a question," she said. "Ask it. Thomas." She kept her voice level. Careful. "You said 8 months, but when exactly did he stop?" "What day?" Samuel's hands went still on the cup. "Morning after the funeral. He came down for breakfast, same as always. I asked how he slept." He stopped, swallowed hard. He said, "Fine." Just that one word. Then nothing. Not a sound from that day to this. What happened to her, to Catherine? His face closed up like a shutter slamming. "I said no questions about Catherine. Mr. Thornton, that is the deal." His voice went flat and hard as the table between them. "You want to stay. You take the terms as they stand. You want answers. You find them somewhere else." Elena held his gaze. She could push. She could demand. She could walk out the door right now with her $12 and her broken carpet bag and take her chances with the world. Or she could stay and watch and learn. "All right," she said. "I accept your terms." She put out her hand across the table. Same gesture as at the station. Same straight spine. Samuel looked at her hand, then at her face. He took it. His grip was brief and firm. "Saturday we go to town. See the preacher. Make it legal." "Fine." He stood, scraping the chair back. At the door he stopped with one hand on the frame. "The boy will not make it easy. He does not trust anymore." "Neither do you." He did not argue. He looked at her with those creek-water eyes, and for just a moment she saw something underneath, wounded and wary, and almost human. Then he was gone. The door swung shut behind him. His boots thudded across the porch and down the steps. Elena sat alone at the scarred table. The fire crackled in the stove. Coffee cooled in her cup. Through the window she could see dawn light spreading gold across the eastern hills. Footsteps overhead. Small ones. a child moving across floorboards. She looked up at the ceiling, tracking the sound. Thomas was awake. Thomas was moving. The footsteps stopped directly above her head. Then, slowly, they started down the stairs. Elena stood. Her hands were steady, but her heart beat hard against her ribs. The footsteps reached the bottom. Paused, started toward the kitchen. She turned to face the doorway. A small shape appeared in the frame. Pale face, dark hair falling across his forehead, eyes the color of his father's, but emptier, older than any 7-year-old's eyes should be. Thomas Thornton stood looking at her. Not through her. At her. Seeing her for the first time. In his hand, gripped so tight his knuckles had gone white, was a woman's handkerchief. White cotton, edged with lace, embroidered with the same small flowers that decorated the apron Elena wore. And it smelled of lavender. Faint. Almost gone. But there, 2 weeks passed. Elena learned the rhythms of the house the way she had once learned hymns, through repetition, through patience, through the slow gathering of small certainties. Coffee at dawn. Before the rooster finished his rounds, bread dough mixed and set to rise by the time the sun cleared the barn roof, lamp wicks trimmed and chimneys cleaned before supper. The stove fed steady through the day, banking coals at night. She did not push Thomas, did not corner him with questions or crowd him with attention. She simply moved through the same rooms he moved through, steady as a clock, predictable as sunrise. The boy watched her. She felt his eyes on her back, when she kneaded dough at the big table, when she swept the porch boards clean, when she hung wet sheets on the line strung between the house and the old oak tree. He never came close, never spoke, but he watched. Mrs. Garza noticed. "He follows you," she said one morning, elbow deep in dishwater, like a barn cat deciding whether to bolt or beg scraps. "He is just curious. Curious is good. Curious means something's still alive in there." The old woman scrubbed a pot hard enough to take the tin off. "After his mama passed, he was not curious about nothing, just those blocks, stack and fall, like some little machine." Elena dried a plate and set it in the cupboard. The china was blue willow pattern, chipped at the edges from years of use. What was she like, Senora Thornton? Mrs. Garza's hands went still in the gray water. "She played piano," she said at last, "every Sunday evening after church. Hymns mostly, sometimes other songs, things from back east, places she had been before coming here." Her voice went soft at the edges. "The boy used to sing along. Little voice high and sweet like a meadowlark. 'Abide with me' was their special one. They sang it together every week." Elena glanced toward the parlor doorway. She had noticed the shape in the corner. Her first night, something large covered with a white sheet, gathering dust. "The piano," she said. "Senor Thornton covered it the night she died. Not a soul has touched it since." That evening, after Samuel had gone to the barn for his final check on the stock, and Mrs. Garza had retired to her room off the kitchen, Elena stood alone in the parlor doorway. The house was quiet. Through the ceiling she could hear Thomas moving in his room above the soft thump of blocks being stacked in the dark. The sheet hung white and ghostly in the lamplight from the hall. Dust lay thick on its folds, undisturbed for 8 months. Elena crossed the room. Her footsteps sounded too loud in the silence. She stopped before the shrouded shape and stood there with her hand raised, fingers hovering over the fabric. "What are you doing?" The voice in her head was sharp. "This is not your house, not your piano, not your grief to disturb." But her hand was already moving, already gripping cloth, already pulling. The sheet slid away like skin peeling from a healing wound. Beneath it, the piano stood waiting, rosewood cabinet dulled with neglect, ivory keys gone yellow at the edges. A hymnal sat open on the music stand, the pages soft and wavy from humidity. Elena lowered herself onto the bench. The wood was cold through her thin dress. She placed her fingers on the keys. Not pressing yet, just feeling the slight give of ivory against her fingertips. She had learned piano at the orphanage. Nothing fancy. Simple hymns to accompany Sunday services. Just enough to be useful. Her right hand found a chord. C major. The first shape any child learns. She pressed down. Sound filled the room rich and full, though the upper notes rang slightly flat from months without tuning. A piano that had been silent too long, remembering how to sing. Elena played the opening bars of "Abide with Me." Slow, careful. Her fingers found the notes from some deep place below memory. She made it through the first verse before she heard them. Footsteps, soft, careful, the footsteps of someone trying hard not to be heard. She did not turn around, kept her eyes on the yellowed keys, her ears tracking the small sounds behind her. The footsteps stopped, near the doorway, close. She finished the verse. Let the last chord fade to silence. Still she did not turn. "I will play again tomorrow evening," she said quietly, to the empty air. "If you want to listen." No answer. Not a sound. Then soft as a held breath, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of bare feet retreating on wood. The footsteps went up the stairs and faded into the rooms above. Elena sat alone at the piano, hands resting on silent keys. Her palms were damp. Her pulse beat quick in her throat. She had not looked, had not turned around, had given him the choice to stay or run. He had run, but he had come first. That was the thing that mattered. He had come. The next evening she played again. Same hymn, same slow, careful notes. The footsteps came again, stopped in the same spot, listened. This time they stayed longer before retreating. The third evening. Elena heard something different, a soft thump, like a small body settling against the doorframe. She played all 4 verses straight through. When she finished, the quality of silence behind her had changed. Fuller somehow. Inhabited. She still did not turn. "Your mama had a beautiful piano," she said to the darkness over her shoulder. "I reckon it missed being played." Nothing. "I am not near as good as she was, I am certain of that, but I can try." Still nothing. "Good night, Thomas." The footsteps retreated, slower this time, reluctant. Elena allowed herself a small smile in the empty room. The next morning she found something outside her bedroom door, a single wooden block set square in the center of the threshold. Red paint worn at the corners from years of small hands. She picked it up, turned it over. Such a small thing. Such a simple offering. The first thing Thomas had given anyone in 8 months. She carried it downstairs, tucked in her apron pocket, and said nothing about it to anyone. Some gifts were too fragile for words. That afternoon she brought water to Samuel in the north pasture. The sun stood high and brutal, the air thick with dust and the green smell of cattle. She found him bent over a fence post, setting wire, his shirt black with sweat. "Mrs. Garza thought you might be thirsty." He straightened slow, pressing one hand to the small of his back, looked at the jar in her hand, then at her face. Something moved behind his eyes, surprise maybe, or suspicion, but he took the water without comment. He drank the whole jar without stopping. His throat worked with each swallow. When he finished, he dragged his sleeve across his mouth and handed back the empty jar. "Thank you." 2 words, more than he usually offered. Elena nodded and turned to go. "The piano," he said. She stopped, did not turn around. "I heard you playing. These last few nights." "I am sorry. I should have asked before." "No." His voice was rough, but not angry. "It is fine. She would have—" He stopped, started again. "Catherine would have wanted it played. She could not stand silence." Elena turned then. Samuel was staring at the fence post, not at her. His hands gripped the wire cutters, knuckles white. "Thomas listens," she said. "He stands in the doorway, does not come in. But he listens." Samuel's hands went still. "He does, every night now, stays a little longer each time." For a long moment, Samuel said nothing. Cattle lowed somewhere beyond the rise. Wind stirred the dry grass with a sound like whispered secrets. A hawk circled slow overhead, riding the heat. "Keep playing," he said finally. "Whatever you want to play, just keep at it." He turned back to his fence. The conversation was over. Elena walked back toward the house, the empty jar swinging loose in her hand. Sun beat down hot on her shoulders, but she paid it no mind. Something was shifting in this place. Something small and slow and careful, like a green shoot pushing up through cracked ground. She felt it in the way Thomas lingered in doorways now, watching her with those old young eyes, felt it in the way Samuel found reasons to come to the house more often for coffee, for water, for tools he had forgotten. She felt it in herself, too, the way she had stopped counting days until she could leave, the way she had started counting different things instead. A wooden block on a threshold, a jar of water accepted without suspicion, a hymn played in an empty room while a silent boy listened from the shadows. Small mercies, ordinary gifts, the things that put a broken house back together, one tiny piece at a time. Elena reached the kitchen door and paused with her hand on the latch. Through the window glass, she saw Thomas sitting at the table. Mrs. Garza had set him to shelling beans from the garden, and his small fingers worked through the pile quick and steady, splitting pods and dropping pale beans into a cracked bowl. He looked up, saw her through the glass. The corner of his mouth twitched. Just barely, just for an instant, not a smile, not quite, but close. Closer than yesterday. Elena pushed open the door and stepped into the kitchen's warm bread smell. "I hear you are good with beans," she said. Thomas looked down at his work. Fingers kept moving, steady and sure. "The brown hen laid 2 eggs today," Elena went on, crossing to the sink to wash out the jar. "I have been calling her Mabel. She is lazy as sin, but she tries." She was filling silence, and she knew it. Talking low and easy the way you talk to a spooked horse. No quick moves, no loud sounds. Thomas's fingers paused on a bean pod. Elena kept her back to him. kept washing, kept the words coming gentle. The spotted one gave us 3. I do not have a proper name for her yet. Maybe you could think of one. Silence stretched thin as wire. Then, quiet as dust settling, Penny. Elena's hands went still in the water. Penny, she repeated. Careful. That is a fine name. Mama named her. His voice was rusty, creaking, like a gate too long unopened. Before. Elena turned off the pump, dried her hands slow on her apron, turned around even slower, the way you move when any sudden thing might shatter what has just begun. Thomas was watching her. His eyes were wet, but the tears stayed put. Your mama knew her chickens, Elena said. He nodded once. A real nod. A child's nod. Then he looked back at the beans. His fingers started moving again. The moment passed. But it had been real. It had happened. One word, one name, one tiny bridge thrown across 8 months of silence. Elena turned back to the sink, her hands unsteady, her heart knocking hard behind her ribs. Through the window she saw Samuel crossing the yard toward the barn. He stopped halfway, turned, stood looking at the house. She could not read his face from here, but she could see the way he stood there, still as a fence post, staring at the kitchen window like he was trying to see through the walls, like he sensed something had changed inside, like he was afraid to find out what. Thomas spoke more now. Not much, not often, but enough. Short sentences, questions about small, ordinary things. The chickens and their eggs, the bread dough rising under its cloth, the color of thread Elena used to mend a tear in his Sunday shirt. Elena answered each question plain, without fuss or show. She had learned that too much attention sent him scurrying back into silence like a rabbit diving for its hole. Better to treat his words like ordinary things expected. Unremarkable. Nothing to make a fuss over. But each syllable felt like a gift wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. The 3rd week brought changes she had not looked for. Samuel started coming to the house during daylight hours, not just for water or coffee, but for reasons he could not seem to name. He would stand in the kitchen doorway, turning his hat in his hands, watching Elena roll out biscuit dough or scrub the big iron pot. Need anything from town? He asked one morning, his voice gruff as gravel. Thread, if they have it, brown, and sugar. The tin is near empty. He nodded, did not leave. Elena looked up from the dough, flour dusting her forearms to the elbow. Something else. His jaw worked. That familiar motion, like chewing on words that did not want to come loose. The boy, he said finally. He talked to you. Mrs. Garza said so. He did. What did he say? Elena's hands kept working the dough. Push, fold, turn, the rhythm steady as a heartbeat. He named a chicken, Penny, said his mama gave her that name. Samuel's knuckles went white on the hat brim. That is plenty, Mr. Thornton. That is more than plenty. He stood there another moment, watching her hands shape the dough. Then he turned and left without another word. The screen door banging shut behind him, Elena let out a breath she had not known she was holding. That afternoon she took Thomas to the henhouse. The building was small, weathered gray as driftwood. Straw scattered thick across the dirt floor. The smell hit her at the door feathers and droppings and the warm animal musk of living things. Dust motes floated golden in the light, slanting through cracks in the boards. Thomas hung back at the threshold. His bare feet curled against the worn wood. "You do not have to come in," Elena said. She crouched by the first nesting box and reached beneath a rust-colored hen who clucked complaint. "I just reckoned you might want to meet everyone proper." She pulled out an egg, warm and brown and smooth as river stone, and held it up for him to see. "This one is Mabel's. She finally decided to earn her keep." Thomas did not move, but his eyes tracked the egg, followed it as Elena set it careful in her basket. "And this here," she moved to the next box, where a spotted hen sat, puffed with indignation. "This is Penny's work. 3 today. She is showing off." Thomas took one step into the henhouse, then another. Straw crunched soft under his bare feet. Elena kept her back to him, kept gathering eggs, kept her voice low and easy. "Now, Mabel, do not look at me like that. You had all morning to lay, and here you are just getting around to it." A sound behind her. Small, strange. She turned. Thomas stood in the middle of the henhouse, thin shoulders shaking. For one terrible moment, she thought he was crying. Then she saw his face. His mouth open, his eyes squeezed shut. He was laughing. Silent laughter, soundless, but real. Laughter that had been locked up tight for 8 months, finally finding a crack to squeeze through. Elena did not move, did not speak. Just watched as the boy laughed at a scolded chicken. When it passed, Thomas wiped his eyes with his sleeve. His face was flushed red, his breathing ragged and quick. "The spotted one is Mabel," he said. His voice was stronger now, more certain. "Mama said she was the lazy one." Elena looked at the rust-colored hen, then at the spotted one. "I had them backwards this whole time." Thomas nodded. A real nod. A child's nod with a child's certainty. "Well," Elena said, "your mama surely knew her chickens." Something moved in Thomas's face, the shadow of a smile, quick as a fish in clear water. "She knew everything about chickens," he said, "and horses, and the garden too." He stopped. Swallowed. She always knew when storms were coming, before anybody else could tell. Elena set the egg basket down slow and careful on the straw. "She sounds like a very wise woman." "She was." Thomas's voice wobbled but held steady. "She could make anything grow. Papa said she had hands that could coax flowers out of bare rock." "Papa." The word landed soft as a feather, but heavy as stone. What else could she do? Thomas was quiet for a long stretch. The hens clucked and muttered around them, scratching at straw, unaware of the weight of words being spoken above their bobbing heads. "She could sing," he said at last. "Every night before bed, she would sit on my bed and sing until I fell asleep." Elena's throat tightened like a fist was closing around it. "What songs did she sing? Abide with me." The words came out cracked down the middle. "That was our special one, just hers and mine." Elena thought of the hymnal on the piano stand, open to a page she had not looked at close. She thought of the first notes she had played, chosen almost by accident in the dusty parlor. Not accident at all, not accident one bit. "Would you like—" She stopped, tried again. "Would you like me to play it tonight on the piano, that song?" Thomas's eyes went wide as dollars. She thought she had pushed too far, asked too much, broken whatever fragile thing was growing between them. Then he nodded. small, fragile as a soap bubble. "All right," he whispered. "All right." That evening, Elena sat at the piano as the last daylight faded from the windows. Thomas stood in his usual spot by the doorway. But closer now. Close enough she could hear him breathing. She set her fingers on the cool ivory. "Abide with me," she began to sing, her voice thin and unpracticed, but true. Fast falls the eventide. The notes filled the room. Simple. Old. A melody that had lived in this house long before she came. The darkness deepens. "Lord, with me abide." Movement behind her, footsteps, the soft sound of bare feet on wood floor. When other helpers fail and comforts flee. Something warm settled onto the bench beside her. A small body. Trembling. "Help of the helpless. Oh, abide with me." And then another voice joined hers. Thin, rusty, breaking on every other note, but real, true, alive. Thomas was singing. Elena's fingers stumbled on the keys. She caught herself, kept playing, forced her hands to remember what her mind had lost. They finished the verse together. The last note hung trembling in the lamplight. Neither moved. Elena looked down at the boy beside her. Tears ran down his face, but he was not sobbing, just leaking, grief pouring out of him like water through a cracked jug. "I miss her," he said. "I miss her every single day." Elena did not think. She put her arm around his thin shoulders and pulled him close against her side. He did not fight. He leaned in. His small body shook. His tears soaked through her dress to the skin beneath. "I know," she said into his hair. "I know you do." They sat that way while darkness gathered thick around them, the piano silent, the house still, the lamp burning low on the parlor table. Elena did not hear the footsteps in the hallway, did not see the shape standing still in the shadows beyond the doorway. But Samuel was there. He saw his boy weeping in a stranger's arms, saw the child who had not made a sound in 8 months crying for the mother he had lost. Something behind his ribs, something locked tight, since the night he covered that piano, began to give way like ice breaking up on a spring river. He stepped back before they could see him. His hands shook. His chest hurt like something was pressing hard against it. He walked through the kitchen and out the back door into the dark yard. The stars were thick overhead, cold, far away. He had stood in this same spot the night Catherine died, staring up at those same stars, asking questions no one could answer. Now he stood here again, asking different questions. Who was this woman who had walked into his house and opened his boy's voice like a key turning a rusted lock? What gave her the right to sit at Catherine's piano, wearing Catherine's apron, holding Catherine's child? And why did it not feel like betrayal? Why did it feel like something else altogether? Samuel pressed the heels of his hands hard against his closed eyes. His throat burned with something he could not swallow down. Behind him, through the kitchen window, came Elena's voice, low and gentle, talking to Thomas about something simple. The chickens, maybe. The bread she would bake come morning. Simple things. Small things. The things that held a life together when everything else fell to pieces. He dropped his hands, looked back at the house. The lamp in the kitchen window glowed warm and yellow. Inside that circle of light, his son was talking. His son was crying. His son was more alive than he had been in 8 long months. Because of her, Samuel drew a deep breath, let it out slow through his teeth. Then he walked back toward the house, boots heavy on the hard-packed dirt, the weight in his chest heavier still. He did not know what he was walking toward, did not know what words he would find when he got there. He only knew that something had changed, and there was no way back to what had been before. Samuel found reasons to stay close to the house. He noticed it first in small ways. The coffee he nursed at the kitchen table long after the cup went cold. The tools he forgot in the barn that required trips back across the yard. The questions he asked about Thomas, questions he could have answered himself if he had only paid attention these past months. But paying attention meant looking, and looking meant seeing Elena. She moved through his house like she had always lived there, her hands on Catherine's blue willow dishes, her voice filling Catherine's kitchen with talk of bread and weather and the small doings of chickens. Her laughter rare but real when it came filling corners that had been silent since the funeral. It unsettled him. It drew him close. He could not tell which feeling ran stronger. One evening, he came in from the barn to find Elena reading aloud by the fireplace. Thomas sat on the braided rug at her feet, his head resting against her knee, eyes half shut. Her voice moved steady through a story about a knight and a dragon and a castle made of ice. Samuel stopped in the doorway, hat in his hands, watching. Thomas looked different. Softer somehow, the hard edges of grief worn smooth, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. Elena glanced up. Their eyes caught and held. She did not stop reading. Her voice went on, low and unhurried, but something passed between them across the dim room. A question with no words. An answer with no shape. Samuel turned away, climbed the stairs, shut his bedroom door. He sat on the edge of the bed he had shared with Catherine for 9 years and pressed the heels of his hands hard against his eyes. "What are you doing?" The voice in his head was sharp as a slap. "What are you letting yourself feel?" He had no answers. Was not certain he wanted any. Morning came gray and cool. Elena was already in the garden when he found her, kneeling in the dirt between rows of tomato plants. Her hands worked the soil around the stems, pulling weeds, loosening earth. Sweat darkened the back of her dress, though the sun had barely topped the barn. "You are up early," he said. She did not look up. "Could not sleep. Me neither." He stood there with his hands empty at his sides, watching her work. Her movements were quick and sure, the hands of someone who knew how to make things grow. "Catherine loved this garden," he said. The words fell out before he could catch them. "She planted most of what you see, the tomatoes, the beans, that squash by the fence." Elena's hands paused in the black dirt. "Mrs. Garza told me she could grow anything, even here in this dry country. She had a gift for it. She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was." Elena looked up then. Dirt streaked her cheek. Hair was coming loose from its pins. She looked tired. She looked real. Samuel's chest went tight as a cinched saddle. "Mr. Thornton." Her voice was careful, picking its way like a horse on rocky ground. "You do not have to—" "Samuel." She blinked. "Pardon. Call me Samuel. Mr. Thornton was my father, and my grandfather before him." A beat of quiet, then, slow as honey, Samuel. His name in her mouth, familiar and strange at once. "I wanted to thank you," he said, For what you have done with Thomas. I have not done anything special. You got him talking again. You got him singing. He stopped, swallowed against the tightness in his throat. Last night I heard him laugh. Truly laugh. First time since... He could not finish. Did not need to. Elena rose to her feet, brushing dirt from her skirt. He is a good boy. He just needed someone to listen. I should have listened. Should have been the one to... You were grieving too. The words hit him like a fist to the chest. Plain, true, no softening. I still am, he said. Quiet. Some days I wake up and forget she is gone. I reach across the bed for her, and it is empty. For just a second, I think maybe she is already downstairs making coffee the way she always did. Elena said nothing. Just stood there with morning light behind her, listening. Then I remember. His voice cracked like dry wood. And it is like losing her fresh every single morning. That is not weakness, Elena said. That is love. He looked at her, past the dirt and the sweat and the borrowed apron, past the stranger who had stepped off a train 6 weeks back with nothing but a carpet bag and a telegram. Who did you lose? He asked. Elena's face shifted. Something old and buried moved behind her eyes. Everybody, she said. My folks when I was 12. Fever took them both inside a week. The sisters who raised me after. The home I grew up in when they closed the doors. She paused. And William, a man I never met but crossed half the world to marry. Do you regret it, coming here? The question hung in the air between them. The garden was quiet. Even the mockingbird on the fence post had gone still. No, she said at last. I do not. Samuel felt something shift deep inside him, something he had been gripping tight for 8 months, refusing to look at, refusing to name. The contract, he said. The terms we agreed on. What about them? I am not certain. He stopped, started fresh. I am not sure they make sense anymore. Elena's breath caught. He heard it a quick intake, fast controlled. What are you saying? I do not know. The words came rough and honest. I do not rightly know what I am saying. I just know that when I look at you, when I see you with Thomas, when I hear you at Catherine's piano, I do not feel what I thought I would feel. What did you expect to feel? Anger, betrayal, like you were stealing her place. And instead, Samuel looked at the garden, at the tomatoes Catherine had planted, still growing strong, still putting out red fruit, putting out. At the woman who tended them now without being asked, without complaint. Instead, I feel... The words would not come. He did not have the right ones. Elena stepped closer, near enough he could smell earth on her hands, soap in her hair. Samuel. Her voice was low. I am not trying to take her place. I could not do that even if I wanted to. I know that. Then what is this? What are we doing here? He met her eyes, brown and warm and patient as good soil. I do not know, he said again. But I would like to find out. The moment stretched thin between them. The sun climbed higher. From the house came the sound of Thomas waking, his bare feet hitting the floor above the kitchen. All right, Elena said, soft as a prayer. All right. She did not touch him. He did not touch her. They just stood there in the garden dirt, Two people balanced on the edge of something neither one could name. Then Thomas's voice rang out from the kitchen window. "Elena, Papa, Mrs. Garza says breakfast is ready." "Papa?" The word shot through Samuel like summer lightning. He looked at Elena. She was smiling, truly smiling for the first time since she had come to this place. "He called you Papa," she said. "He did. He has not called you that since—" "I know." Samuel turned toward the house. His boy stood framed in the window, waving one arm, face bright with something that looked almost like joy. "Coming," he called back, his voice rough. He started walking, then stopped, turned. "Elena." She looked up, waiting. "I am glad you did not get on that train." He did not wait for an answer. He walked toward the house, toward his son, toward whatever was coming next. Behind him, Elena stood alone in the garden, hands still dirty, heart beating hard against her ribs. She looked up at the sky, blue and endless without a single cloud. Good weather, the kind that made you trust good things could happen. But something prickled at the edge of her mind, a feeling she could not name. She looked south, where the horizon met the earth in a flat, brown line. The air seemed heavier there, thicker somehow, charged with something waiting. Mrs. Garza's words came back to her unbidden. She always knew when storms were coming, before anyone else could tell. Elena shivered, though the morning was warm. She could not say what was coming, but something was, and she knew in her bones it would test everything they had started to build. A month had passed since Elena stepped off the platform at Redstone Junction. The house had found its rhythm now, breakfast at dawn, work through the heat of day. Supper as the sun went down. Laughter lived here again, rare and startling when it came, breaking through the quiet like bird song through fog. Thomas helped in the kitchen garden most mornings. His small hands pulled weeds with careful attention, and his voice still rough at the edges but growing stronger, asked questions about everything under the sun. Why did tomatoes turn red when they ripened? How did beans know which way to climb? What made the squash grow so heavy it bent the vine to the ground? Elena answered each question, serious as Sunday, like they were the most important questions ever asked, because to Thomas, they were. Samuel watched from the edges of things. He found reasons to come to the house more often now, excuses that fooled no one. He lingered longer at meals. He stood in doorways with his hat in his hands. Once Elena caught him at the parlor entrance while she played piano, his face unreadable in the yellow lamplight. They did not speak of what had passed between them in the garden that morning, but something had shifted, and everyone felt the change. Even Mrs. Garza, who said nothing but smiled into her mending with knowing eyes. On the 4th Sunday of June, Samuel did something he had not done since Catherine's funeral. He asked if they might take supper out on the porch. "Evening's warm enough," he said, not quite meeting Elena's eyes. "Might be nice to watch the sun go down." Thomas looked up from his plate, eyes wide as saucers. "We have not done that since," he stopped. The unfinished words hung in the air like smoke. "Since your mama." Samuel finished quiet. "I know. I reckoned maybe it was time." They carried the table outside together, Samuel and Elena at either end, Thomas directing them with the authority of a general commanding troops. Mrs. Garza brought the food out last, roast chicken with crisp skin, fresh bread still warm from the oven, green beans from the garden that Thomas had helped pick that very morning. The sunset painted the prairie in shades of copper and rose. Cattle lowed soft in the far pasture. A hawk circled lazy overhead. riding the last warm currents of the day. Samuel sat at the head of the table. Elena sat across from him. Thomas sat between, talking without pause about the hawk and the chickens and the fat grasshopper he had caught by the barn and let go again. For the first time in near a year, the Thornton Ranch felt like home. "Papa," Thomas said through a mouthful of bread, "tell Elena about Mama and the storms." Samuel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Thomas, please, it is a good story. She would like it." Elena watched Samuel's face. The struggle there was plain to see, the past pulling against the present. Old grief wrestling with something new trying to be born. "Your mama loved storms," he said at last, setting down his fork. "Most folks in these parts see lightning on the horizon and head for cover, quick. Not Catherine. She would stand right here on this porch and watch them roll in across the flats. Said it was like watching—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Like watching creation happen right before your eyes." "She was not afraid?" Elena asked. "Never once. She used to say fear was just excitement that had not caught its breath yet." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "She was always saying things like that. Things that made no sense until you thought on them a while." Thomas was beaming bright as the sun set. "Tell her about when Mama danced in the rain." "Some other night, maybe. But Papa, some other night." The firmness in his voice closed the door on that. But something in his eyes had gone soft. A crack in the wall. Just a sliver of light showing through. Elena turned her gaze south. The sunset colors were fading now, bleeding into deeper blues and purples. But along the far horizon, something else was building. A heaviness in the air. A weight pressing down that she could feel on her skin like a hand. "Samuel." She kept her voice low. "Look at the sky." He turned. Looked. His whole body went stiff as fence wire. Along the southern horizon, clouds were piling up thick and dark. Not the soft white clouds of summer afternoons. Something else. Something that swallowed light and gave nothing back. "That came up fast," he said, half to himself. He was already pushing back from the table. His meal forgotten, his eyes scanned the sky the way a sailor reads the sea, searching for signs, calculating distance and speed. "How far off?" Elena asked. "Maybe 10 miles. Could be less." He shook his head slow. "Hard to tell with dry storms. They move different than regular weather. Dry storms. Lightning with no rain to speak of. Most dangerous kind there is out here." He was moving now, stacking plates with rough efficiency. "Fire weather. One bolt hits the wrong patch of grass, and the whole prairie goes up in smoke." Elena's stomach clenched tight. She thought of the barns stacked full of summer hay, the hen house with its dry wooden walls, the house itself, boards baked bone-dry by weeks of sun and wind. "What do we do? Get ready." Samuel's voice was flat and hard, the voice of a man who had seen this before. "Thomas, go help Mrs. Garza clear the kitchen. Elena." He stopped, looked at her straight. "You ever fought a grass fire?" "No." "Then stay inside with the boy. Keep him safe. If the fire comes this direction." "I am not staying inside." The words came out sharp as a blade. Samuel's eyebrows climbed his forehead. "Elena, tell me what needs doing and I will do it. But I'm not going to hide in the house while you fight this thing alone." Something moved in his face. Surprise, maybe. Or something deeper than surprise. All right then, he said. Come with me. They spent the next hour getting ready. Samuel showed her where the long-handled shovels hung in the barn, how to soak burlap sacks in the water barrels, where those barrels sat at each corner of the house. He walked her through the making of fire breaks, trenches scraped down to bare dirt to starve flames of fuel, and pointed out the paths the cattle would follow if they had to be turned loose. If it gets bad, he said, we open the gates and let the stock run. Cattle will find their way. They will survive. Buildings we can put back up. Cows we cannot. Elena stored each word away careful. Her dress was dark with sweat. Her hair stuck flat to her forehead. The air grew heavier with each passing minute, thick and hard to breathe. The first lightning flickered white on the horizon, just as the last daylight died. Thomas stood on the porch with Mrs. Garza, watching. His small face was pale as milk in the gathering dark. "Papa," his voice was thin and high. "Is it going to be like before?" Samuel stopped what he was doing, walked to the porch, knelt down in front of his son so their eyes were level. "I cannot say for certain," he said, honest. "But we are ready this time. We have water. We have tools. We have got each other. Mama always knew when the storms were coming." Thomas's voice cracked down the middle. She could feel them before anyone. She said the air tasted different. Samuel's jaw went tight as a trap. "I remember, son. She went to check the creek that night." The words poured out now like water through a broken dam. "Because she knew the storm would fill it up fast. She went out to move the calves to higher ground and she did not come back." Elena's heart clenched like a fist closing. Flash flood. Catherine had drowned in a flash flood, trying to save livestock during a storm. Samuel had been in town, buying nails, 10 pounds of nails. The pieces fell together with terrible weight. Samuel pulled Thomas close and held him tight. Over the boy's head, his eyes found Elena's across the dark yard. The look there was stripped bare, raw. The face of a man who had failed once and could not stand to fail again. "Go inside now," he said to Thomas. "Stay with Mrs. Garza. Whatever happens out here, you stay put inside. You hear me? But Papa, promise me, son." Thomas's small body shook against his father's chest. Then he nodded, his face buried in Samuel's shirt. "I promise." Mrs. Garza led the boy through the door. It closed behind them with a solid thump. Samuel stood up slow. His hands were shaking. "You should go in too," he said to Elena. "This is not your fight." "Yes, it is." "Elena, I did not come 1,000 miles to hide when things turn hard." When she stepped closer to him in the dark, "You gave me a roof over my head, a place to belong. Let me help you keep it standing." Lightning forked across the clouds to the south, bright enough to throw shadows. Thunder followed a few seconds behind a low rumble that Elena felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. Samuel looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he nodded once. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do exactly what I tell you when I tell you." "I will." They stood side by side on the porch, watching the storm build and spread across the southern sky. The wind was rising now, hot and dry, carrying the smell of dust and something sharp underneath, like iron, like blood before a wound opens. Somewhere out in the dark, the cattle had gone restless. Elena could hear them calling to each other, moving, bunching up the way animals do when they sense bad things coming. Samuel's hand found hers in the darkness. His grip was rough with calluses, warm despite the wind. "Whatever comes," he said low. "I am glad you are here." She squeezed back. "So am I." The first bolt of true lightning struck the earth 3 miles south. For one frozen heartbeat, the whole prairie lit up white as noon, every blade of grass, every fence post, every shadow thrown sharp and black, then dark again, darker than before. And there at the edge of sight, right where the lightning had touched down, Elena saw something that turned her blood to ice water. A line of orange light, flickering, spreading, growing wider as she watched. Fire. "Samuel," she breathed. But he was already running. The fire moved faster than Elena could have imagined. One moment it was a distant orange line on the dark horizon. The next it was a wall, a living, breathing wall of flame that swallowed dry grass like a starving beast. Wind pushed it forward without mercy, driving it toward the ranch with terrible purpose. Elena ran after Samuel, her boots pounding hard on packed earth. The heat reached her face before she made it to the north fence, a blast of furnace air that stole her breath and set her eyes streaming. "Shovels!" Samuel shouted over the roar. "By the barn door!" She veered left and sprinted for the barn. Inside, the horses screamed and kicked at their stall doors, the whites of their eyes glowing wild in the darkness. She grabbed 2 shovels, a hoe, an armful of burlap sacks from the hooks by the door. When she came out, Samuel was already at the water barrel, plunging the sacks under. His movements were quick and desperate, driven by something that looked like panic barely held in check. "We dig here." He pointed to a line 20 yards from the north pasture fence. "Fire break. Scrape everything down to bare dirt. Give the fire nothing to grab hold of." Elena drove her shovel into the ground. The earth was hard and dry, fighting back against the blade. Her shoulders screamed with the first bite. She ignored them, drove the shovel down again, and again, and again. Beside her, Samuel worked like a man possessed. His shirt was soaked black with sweat, plastered flat to his back. His breath came in harsh, ragged gasps. The fire crept closer. Elena could see individual flames now, tongues of orange and yellow licking at the grass, leaping from clump to clump like living things hunting prey. Smoke thickened the air to gray soup, turning each breath into a battle. Her lungs burned, her eyes poured water. She kept digging. Not fast enough. Samuel's voice was raw as torn meat. "Wind is pushing it too hard." A gust caught the flames and sent them jumping forward 10 feet in one bound. Embers swirled through the dark air like swarms of fireflies, landing on dry grass and spawning new blazes wherever they touched down. Elena grabbed a soaked burlap sack and ran toward the nearest spark. She beat at it hard, smothering it, feeling heat scorch through the wet fabric to her palms. Another ember landed behind her. She spun and beat that one down too. It was like fighting the ocean with a tin cup. For every flame she killed, 2 more sprang up in its place. The cattle. Samuel was running toward the pasture gate, his face black with soot in the firelight. "We have to turn them loose." Elena followed. The gate was heavy. The iron latch rusted stiff. Samuel's hands slipped twice on the metal before it gave way with a screech. The cattle bolted through the gap. A thunder of hooves, a chorus of terrified bellowing that sounded almost human. They poured past in a dark flood and scattered into the night. running from the fire, running from the smoke, running from everything that meant death. Elena watched them disappear into darkness. 50 had 60. A year of work vanishing into the black. Leave them! Samuel grabbed her arm hard. The house. We have to save the house. They ran back. The fire had reached the north fence now, wooden posts going up like matchsticks, wire glowing red before it sagged and fell. The heat was a physical force, a giant hand pressing against Elena's chest. Shoving the air from her lungs, she grabbed a shovel and kept digging. Her hands were raw inside her gloves now, blisters rising and breaking with every stroke. Her back screamed. Her legs shook beneath her. She did not stop. Samuel was beside her working the hoe, cutting a ragged line through the earth. His face was a mask of soot and concentration, and something that looked like terror. "Samuel." Elena's voice came out cracked and thin. "The barn!" A glowing ember had landed on the barn roof, a small orange spot barely visible through the billowing smoke. Growing as she watched. Samuel saw it. His face went white beneath the black. "No." The word came out broken. "No, no, no." He dropped the hoe and ran. Elena watched him grab a bucket and plunge it into the barrel, water sloshing over the sides as he sprinted for the barn. He threw the water at the roof, but wind caught it and scattered it to useless mist. The glow spread wider. Smoke began curling up from the dry shingles. Elena ran to help. They formed a desperate chain bucket to barrel to bucket, barrel to roof, throwing water at flames that seemed to laugh at their pitiful efforts. Heat drove them back step by step. Smoke choked them blind. Still they fought. A section of roof collapsed inward with a great crash. Sparks erupted into the sky like a fountain of burning stars. Samuel stood frozen in the yard, staring at the inferno, the barn where his father had taught him to ride, the barn where he had carved his initials with a pocket knife at age 10, the barn where he had asked Catherine to marry him 15 years ago. Burning. All of it burning. "Samuel." Elena grabbed his arm and pulled hard. "We cannot save it. The house, we have to protect the house." He did not move. His eyes were fixed on the flames, his face slack and empty, like a man watching his own heart burn. "Samuel." She dragged him bodily away from the inferno. He stumbled after her, boots tripping on the rutted ground. The house still stood. Mrs. Garza had wet down the walls from the kitchen pump, and the boards gleamed dark in the hellish light. Thomas's pale face appeared at the window for 1 second before Mrs. Garza pulled him back from the glass. "The firebreak," Elena said. "We finish the firebreak or we lose everything." She picked up her shovel. Her hands were bleeding now, the blisters torn open and weeping. She could not feel the pain, could not afford to feel anything at all. Samuel stood beside her. For a long, terrible moment he did not move. Then slowly, like a man waking from a nightmare, he bent and picked up his hoe. They worked side by side in silence. The fire roared behind them like a runaway freight train, consuming the barn, the north fence, acre after acre of summer grass. But the firebreak held. Bare scraped earth stopped the flames, starved them, forced them to turn aside and seek fuel elsewhere. The wind shifted, not much, just a few degrees to the east, but enough. The fire began curving away from the house, bending toward open prairie where there was nothing to burn but more grass. Elena kept digging. Her vision blurred and swam. Her arms moved on their own, driven by something deeper than conscious thought. She had no idea how long she worked. minutes, hours. Time lost all meaning in the smoke and heat and desperate labor. And then suddenly it was finished. The fire had passed them by. The eastern sky showed the first gray hint of coming dawn. The air still reeked of smoke and char, but the flames were distant now, burning themselves out against the empty prairie to the north. Elena dropped her shovel. Her legs gave way beneath her. She sat down hard in the dirt she had dug, the fire break she had carved with bleeding hands, and could not make herself get up again. Samuel collapsed beside her. His face was black as coal, his eyes red and streaming, his breath coming in harsh, broken gasps. He looked like a man who had been beaten down, dragged through mud and ash, and left for dead. They sat there in the ruined dirt surrounded by the wreckage of the night. The barn still smoldered behind them, nothing left but a skeleton of charred beams pointing at the sky like accusing fingers. The north pasture was gone, just ash and blackened earth as far as the eye could see. The smell of burned grass and singed wood and something else, something sharp and final, filled every breath. But the house stood. The hen house stood. And somewhere out there in the darkness, the cattle were scattered but alive. Samuel turned his head slow to look at her. His eyes were wet from smoke or something else she could not tell. "You stayed," he said. His voice was raw and broken as old rope. "You could have gone inside where it was safe. But you stayed out here with me." Elena looked down at her hands. The work gloves had worn clean through. Her palms were a ruin of blood and blisters and black dirt ground deep into torn skin. She would not hold a needle for weeks. "Of course I stayed," she said. "Why?" She looked up and met his eyes in the gray dawn light. "Because this is my home now, too." The words hung between them, plain and true and impossible to take back. Samuel reached out. His hand, just as torn and bloody as hers, found her fingers in the dirt. He held on tight like a drowning man gripping a rope thrown from shore. "Elena," his voice cracked on her name. "I need to tell you." The kitchen door burst open with a bang. Thomas flew out barefoot in his nightshirt, racing across the ash-covered yard with Mrs. Garza calling after him. He threw himself at both of them, arms around Samuel's neck, one hand gripping Elena's ruined sleeve, and held on with the fierce, desperate strength of a child who had spent the whole night watching the world burn down around him. "Don't leave," the words poured out between sobs. "Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave." Samuel pulled him close with one arm. His other hand still gripped Elena's fingers in the dirt. "Look at me, son." Thomas looked up. His face was wet with tears, his eyes swollen red, his small body shaking like a leaf in a storm. "I am right here," Samuel said. "We are both right here. You hear me? We are not going anywhere. Not me, not her, none of us." He looked at Elena over his son's head. The question in his eyes was naked and raw. She nodded. "None of us," she repeated. "I promise." Thomas's sobs quieted slow. He pressed his face against his father's chest, his hand still clutching Elena's torn sleeve like he would never let go. They sat there in the ash and dirt, the three of them tangled together. As the sun rose red and angry over the ruined pasture, the light was gray at first, filtered through smoke still hanging thick in the air. Then it warmed to gold, then to copper, then to the full blazing light of a new prairie morning. Mrs. Garza appeared in the kitchen doorway. She took in the scene, the burned barn, the blackened fields, The three figures huddled together in the dirt like survivors of a shipwreck and crossed herself slow. "Gracias a Dios," she whispered. "Gracias a Dios." She went back inside without another word. A moment later, Elena heard the familiar clatter of pots, the squeak of the pump handle, the ordinary sounds of breakfast being made, life going on, despite everything, because of everything. Samuel stirred against her. His hand released hers, slow and reluctant, and he pushed himself to his feet with a groan, lifting Thomas with him. "We should get you cleaned up," he said to the boy. "Get some food in you." Thomas's arms tightened around his neck. "I want to stay with you." "I know, but Elena and I need to check what is left, see what we can save." "Can I help?" Samuel looked down at his son's ash-streaked face, his red-rimmed eyes, his desperate, fierce need to be useful. "Yeah," he said soft. "Yeah, you can help." He set Thomas down gentle. The boy reached immediately for Elena's hand. She took it. His small fingers were cold, even in the warm morning air. Together, the three of them walked toward what remained of the barn. The structure was nothing but ruin, now collapsed beams, smoking ash, twisted metal that had once been hinges and tools and tack. The smell was thick enough to choke on. But as they came around the corner, Elena stopped dead. The garden, Catherine's garden, the fire break had curved around it. The tomato plants still stood tall, red fruit gleaming bright in the morning sun. The bean poles were untouched, green vines climbing toward the sky. The squash sprawled fat and heavy across the dark soil, not a leaf singed, surrounded by destruction. The garden had survived. Thomas saw it too. He dropped Elena's hand and ran forward, touching the tomato plants like he needed to prove they were real. "Papa," he turned back with wonder on his face. "Papa, look, the garden made it." Samuel stopped beside Elena. His throat worked hard, but no words came out. "She would have liked that," he finally managed. "Catherine, she would have said the garden was too stubborn to burn." Elena looked at the vegetables growing green and alive in the middle of all that black ruin. She thought about the woman she had never met, the woman who loved storms and made things grow from nothing, the woman whose piano she played, whose apron she wore, whose child now reached for her hand without thinking. "She sounds like someone worth knowing," Elena said quiet. "She was." Samuel's voice was rough as gravel. "And so are you." He turned to face her full in the morning light, with soot covering his face and ash in his hair. He looked 10 years older than his age, but his eyes were clear and bright with something that looked like hope. "When this is over," he said, "when we have rebuilt, I want to talk proper, about what this is between us, about what it could be." Elena's heart beat hard against her broken ribs. "All right," she said. "I would like that." Thomas's voice rang out from the garden. "Elena, come quick. The squash got so big." She smiled, a real smile, the first one in what felt like forever. "Coming," she called back. She started toward the garden, toward the boy, toward whatever was waiting on the other side of all this ruin. Behind her, Samuel watched her go. And for the first time since he had laid his wife to rest beneath the old oak tree on the hill, he let himself feel something he had forgotten existed. Hope. Real hope. The kind that took root in ashes and reached toward the sun. The kind Catherine would have understood. 3 days after the fire, the rain came. Elena stood on the porch and watched it fall. Soft at first, barely more than mist. Then harder, drumming steady on the roof boards, turning ash-covered ground to black mud. The smell rose up clean and sharp, wet earth, washing away the last bitter traces of smoke. Thomas ran out into the yard with his arms spread wide and his face turned up to the sky. His laughter rang across the ranch, bright and real. The laughter of a boy who had remembered how to be young. "He will catch his death out there," Mrs. Garza said from the doorway behind Elena. "Let him be. He needs this." Samuel came around the corner of the house with a hammer in one hand and a fistful of nails in the other. He had been working on the new barn frame since first light, cutting timber, hauling beams, driving posts deep into the ground. Neighbors had come yesterday. A dozen men from town who heard about the fire and showed up with tools and lumber and the quiet determination of folks who understood that trouble was everybody's business out here. The frame stood now, skeleton bones of fresh, pale wood rising from the ashes of the old. Samuel stopped when he saw Thomas dancing in the rain. He set down his hammer on the porch rail and watched. Elena watched him watching. "He is going to be all right," she said. "I know." Samuel's voice was rough, but not with grief. Something else lived in it now. "Because of you. Because of all of us." He turned to look at her. Rain dripped from his dark hair, ran down his weathered face, soaked through his work shirt. He did not seem to notice or care. "Elena." He said her name like it meant something. "I have been wanting to tell you something. I am listening." He drew a long breath. Let it out slow. "That first day at the station, when I saw you standing there alone, I did not want to stop. Told myself you were not my concern. I had weight enough to carry without adding a stranger to the load." Elena waited. The rain fell steady around them. "But I could not drive away." Samuel went on. "I sat in that wagon looking at you, and something inside me, something I reckoned died with Catherine, would not let me leave you standing there." "What was it?" He shook his head slow. "I cannot say for certain. Conscience, maybe, or something simpler than conscience." He paused. "You looked like somebody who had been left behind, and I knew how that felt, knew it down to my bones. I made you a deal," Elena said. "That morning in the garden, you said you wanted to find out what this was between us." "I remember. Have you figured it out yet?" Samuel stepped closer to her, close enough she could see raindrops hanging on his eyelashes, could see the pulse beating in the hollow of his throat. "It is home," he said. The word came out simple and plain. "You are home." Elena felt her eyes burn. Not from smoke this time. "Samuel, I am not asking you to take Catherine's place. Nobody could do that. She was—" His voice cracked like dry wood splitting. "She was everything good in my young life. The mother of my boy. I will carry her with me until they put me in the ground beside her." "I know that. But you—" He reached out and took her hand in his. His fingers were rough with calluses, scraped raw from 3 days of rebuilding. "You are something I did not know I needed until you were already here." Elena looked down at their joined hands. His skin was dark against hers, weathered by decades of sun and wind and hard work. "That contract we made," she said quiet. "The terms we agreed to. What about them? I think we ought to burn them." Samuel's face went still, then slow as sunrise. A smile spread across his features, a real smile. The first true smile she had ever seen from him. It changed his whole face. took years off him, showed her the young man he must have been before grief carved its marks so deep. "I would like that," he said. "I would like that just fine." Thomas came running up the porch steps, dripping wet from head to toe, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split in two. "Did you see me?" he demanded. "Did you see me out there dancing? We saw," Elena said. "You looked like a wild thing." "Mama used to dance in the rain." His voice was easy now when he spoke of her, not broken anymore. "She said it washed all the bad things clean away." Samuel knelt down so his eyes were level with his son's. "She was right about that," he said. "She was right about most things." Thomas looked from his father to Elena and back again. His young face went serious and considering. "Papa, is Elena going to stay here forever, and always?" Samuel glanced up at Elena. The question lived in his eyes, too. "Yes," Elena said. "If you will have me." Thomas threw his wet arms around her waist and pressed his face against her dress. "I will have you," he said fierce. "I will have you forever and ever and ever." Elena held him close. Over his damp head she met Samuel's eyes. He stood up slow and put his arm around them both. They stood that way on the porch, while rain washed the last of the ash from the world. That evening, after Thomas had been dried and fed and tucked into bed, Elena sat at the piano in the parlor. The house was quiet around her. The lamp burned low on the side table. Through the window she could see stars appearing as the clouds broke apart, bright and sharp against the clearing sky. She placed her fingers on the ivory keys. The first notes of "Abide with Me" filled the room, soft and slow. Footsteps sounded behind her. The bench shifted as Samuel sat down at her side. He did not speak, just sat there close enough that their shoulders touched, listening. Elena played through the first verse, then the second. On the third verse, she began to sing. Her voice was thin and rough but steady. "I need thy presence every passing hour. What but thy grace can foil the tempter's power?" Another voice joined hers, small and clear and coming from the parlor doorway. Thomas stood there in his nightshirt, barefoot on the cold floor, hair still damp from the rain. He was singing, really singing. The words his mother had taught him what felt like a lifetime ago. Elena's fingers stumbled on the keys. She caught herself and kept playing. Samuel reached over and covered her hand with his own. They finished the hymn together. 3 voices rising and falling in the yellow lamplight. It was not perfect. Thomas forgot words and hummed through the empty places. Elena hit wrong notes. Samuel's voice cracked on the high parts. But it was real. It was true. It was theirs. When the last note faded, Thomas padded across the room and climbed up onto the bench between them. He leaned his head against Elena's arm, heavy with sleep. "I am glad you came here," he said drowsy. "I am glad you did not get on that train and go away." Elena smoothed his damp hair back from his forehead. "So am I," she whispered. "So am I, sweetheart." Samuel put his arm around them both. The lamp flickered low. Outside the window, the prairie stretched away into darkness, scarred by fire, but already beginning the slow work of healing. In a few weeks, green shoots would push up through the blackened earth. The grass would come back. The cattle would find their way home. The new barn would rise strong from the ashes of the old. And in this house that had been so silent and cold for so long, there would be music again. There would be laughter. There would be the ordinary sounds of a family learning how to live. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of the woman who had stood alone on a wooden platform in Redstone Junction, counting coins, waiting for nothing and no one. That woman was gone now, burned away like dry grass in a fire. In her place stood someone new, someone who had traveled 1,000 miles chasing a ghost and found something better, something solid and true. A home, a family, a love she had not known she was looking for until it found her. Thomas's breathing deepened into sleep. His small hand lay curled and trusting in her lap. Samuel looked at her over the boy's head. "Thank you," he said quiet. "For what? For staying, for fighting beside me, for all of it." Elena leaned across Thomas's sleeping form and kissed Samuel's cheek. A soft kiss, a promise of more to come. "Thank you for stopping that day," she said, "at the station. Thank you for not driving on past." He smiled that new smile of his. "I could not have done that," he said. "Something would not let me." "What something?" He reached out and touched her face, his rough fingers gentle against her skin. "I reckon it was her," he said. "Catherine, I reckon she sent you to us when we needed you most." Elena did not know if she believed in such things, but sitting here with this man and this child, in this house full of music and lamplight, she thought perhaps it did not matter what she believed. Some things were true whether you believed them or not. "We should put him to bed," she whispered. "I will carry him up." Samuel lifted Thomas careful in his arms. The boy stirred, but did not wake. Elena followed them up the narrow stairs to the small room where Thomas had spent 8 months building towers that always fell. The room looked different now. Drawings tacked up on the walls, books stacked by the bed, the red wooden block sitting proud on the windowsill where Elena had placed it weeks ago. Samuel laid his son down gentle and pulled the quilt up to his chin. He bent and kissed the boy's forehead. Elena stood in the doorway, watching. "This is my family now," she thought. "This is where I belong." Samuel crossed the room to stand beside her. "Come on," he said soft. "I will make us some coffee. At this hour, I am not tired. Are you?" She shook her head. They went downstairs together, leaving Thomas's door open a crack so lamplight could find him if he woke afraid. In the kitchen, Samuel made coffee, while Elena sat at the scarred old table. The same table where they had shaken hands like strangers, the same chairs where they had agreed to terms that meant nothing now. Not strangers anymore, not by a long sight. Samuel set 2 cups down and took the chair across from her. "To second chances," he said, raising his cup. "To second chances." Elena echoed. They drank. The coffee was strong and bitter, the way Samuel always made it. She had learned to love it that way. Outside the window, the stars wheeled slow across the clearing sky. The prairie slept beneath them, dark and quiet, and beginning to heal. And in the kitchen of a ranch house 12 miles east of a place called Redstone Junction, 2 people sat together in comfortable silence. Learning that some stories do not end with a train pulling away from a station. Some stories only begin there. There is a quietness that settles after a story like this one. Something tender sits in the chest now. Not heavy exactly, but present. Like the feeling after a long rain when the air smells clean and the ground is soft and everything seems possible again. Many of us have stood where Elena stood, on platforms of our own, watching something pull away, wondering if anything good could ever come from being left behind. Some of us have lived in houses gone silent, waiting for a voice we were not sure would ever return. Perhaps you have known what it is to reach for someone in the dark, uncertain whether they would reach back. These feelings do not need explaining. They do not need to be fixed or understood or turned into something neat and tidy. They are allowed to simply rest here, unfinished. The way embers glow warm long after the fire has burned down. It is all right to let this story go now. It is all right to carry whatever piece of it you need and leave the rest behind. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening, or